Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. This is the podcast conversation with a changemaker working to accelerate the transition to a sustainable, carbon-neutral society. And I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. You know, a sustainable built environment is the foundation for lower energy use, but it's going to take a generation or more to put in place. Today's building industry has adopted several environmental standards that guide more sustainable construction, including the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, or LEED certification, which is a program of the U.S. Green Building Council, the energy efficiency standards from the Passive House Institute, and evolving standards for construction processes, air conditioning, and much more. We're joined today by Dr. Ganesan Visvabharathy, who is the founder of Hawthorne Development Corporation. Hawthorne recently completed 2 net zero projects, the Eco Terra building, which is a 348-unit luxury mixed-use apartment complex in Chicago, and MERU, a net zero carbon and net zero energy certified elder care facility in Virginia. We wanted to share a look at the direction that commercial and residential building is going and the challenges of making sustainability progress. Hawthorne has been using green construction ideas since it was founded in 1984. The company has worked to ensure that buyers are able to maintain their homes easily to keep energy efficiency level high, and uses building practices that help prevent erosion and reduces cost by, for example, using bioswales, rain gardens, and native plants instead of concrete stormwater runoff paths at building locations. You can learn more about Hawthorne Development Corporation at hawthorneworld.com. Hawthorne World is all one word, hawthorneworld.com. So let's get into the details of green construction. Welcome to the show, Dr. Vish. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Surely. We have great weather here in Chicago, so it's great.
Well, it's better to have great weather than bad weather, that's for sure. I wanted to start off and talk about both the projects, Eco Terra and MERU, that you have been working on. Eco Terra is a large multifamily facility. What are the green features that make a multifamily facility sustainable?
There are a number of features. That Eco Terra project has got not just a passive house, but also it is National Green Building Standards, green gold, and also net zero. So there are so many green features. For instance, the use of solar energy is part of it. And then when you talk about passive house, you're talking about the continuous insulation, providing a very tight building. And obviously our insulation on the roof as well as the walls are much higher than code. It is also, it uses HRV, heat recovery ventilation, which means you get a continuous supply of fresh air. So there is no stale air ever in the units, which is very important in today's COVID-laden environment, because we continuously supply fresh air. The stale air never stays in the units. So it has so many of these features that makes it kind of unique.
Now, we understand that the buildings will use between 40 and 60% less energy overall. Will all of the energy be provided by the solar, or is it a combination of solar and grid-connected power?
Well, we have to have grid connection for sure, because solar cannot provide continuous power. So even if you have lithium-ion batteries, you cannot supply the building 24/7. So it is grid connected, but we are able to provide a remote solar field and produce the energy and have like a virtual net metering agreement with the property. So in other words, we can produce solar at a remote site and we just export it to the grid, but we can get credit for that, and by signing a remote purchase agreement with the building.
So essentially the building becomes a dynamic part of the grid, exchanging power when it overproduces and pulling power when it needs it.
Absolutely correct. Yes.
Now with MERU, which is the elder care facility in Virginia, you achieved net zero carbon and net zero energy status, does that mean literally the buildings were constructed without any carbon footprint?
Well, let's define the carbon footprint. If you're talking about does the building itself produce any carbon emission? The answer is no, because the building is all electric, and there is no gas in the building. So we don't produce any carbon at all during construction. Now, if you say, how about the materials used in construction? How were they produced? Well, that's a different equation. How much carbon was used in the production of the drywall or the timber or insulation material, etc. That is a different equation, and we are not there.
Okay. Fair enough. So when you think about how to get there, for instance, we've had a number of conversations about the carbon impact of concrete. Do you see evolution in the building materials environment going on that will allow you maybe sometime during your career, let's put it that way, actually build a building that has embodied carbon levels of 0 or net positive?
If we don't get to 0, but at least get close to 0, for instance, in the concrete, if we use more of fly ash, in autoclave concrete, they are using a bunch of fly ash material. The more fly ash you use, the more environmentally productive, environmentally friendly material that you are using. So in the production of concrete itself, as much as recycling waste, for instance, when we demolish a building, we try to save all the materials, remove the metals, send them for recycling, and then you have the crumb of it. In other words, the concrete and other materials which we use for road purposes. So it's completely recycled and used. So that's one thing that we do that can contribute to environmental sensitivity. And yes, materials such as fly ash play a huge role in reducing the carbon footprint.
Now, you started the company back in the 1980s and have embraced sustainable building practices the entire time. Was that the primary reason that you started Hawthorne, to build green? And what inspired you to do so early?
Well, to a great extent, we have been always ahead of the curve. And the idea of green and energy saving comes from a bit from my background, which is, I'm an engineer, coming from India. We are used to saving energy, saving money, etc. So kind of like inculcated right from childhood. And so when I started looking at the buildings and I looked at the enormous waste. I mean, just to give you one instance, even people at that time, I'm talking about 70s, people didn't even care to switch off the lights. Right. Lights were burning all the time. Tennis courts were lit all night long, etc., etc. So I said, come on, there's got to be a better way. So we started using timers, and long before today, it's kind of norm. Everybody uses it, but we used it a long time ago because it's we were sensitive.
Well, that the perspective of seeing the waste or the useful materials in what we would previously have described as waste is really the underpinning of rethinking our approach to the built environment. So you're looking at an old building as the potential resource to start to build the next building, but you're also looking at the land in the context of how to preserve it and so forth. Let's talk about a couple of just issues that I pulled from reading your site and learning about this. When you pick a lot, what's involved in making a location ready for a green building? And can that be applied to any location, or are there specific characteristics one must look for?
Yeah, there are specific characteristics you should be looking for. For instance, if you want to build a green building, look at the habitat that nestles in the area. So you should be sensitive to that. So you can't just build anywhere. Second, I'm going beyond what the law is. I'm saying,
Right.
we should be sensitive beyond, whatever the law provides. And then, uh, how close is it to transportation is another consideration. And what about the utility connections? How, do we have it? If it is 2-3 miles away, obviously you're wasting a lot of energy in doing it. And finally, density. Density is a plus. When you want to build green, density is a plus. And so we can, even if you're concerned about density in this COVID-laden environment, that's why we are providing all, HRV, heat recovery, ventilation, fresh air, etc. So there are ways of handling density, but higher the density, the better it is for a green building.
Now, a few minutes ago, you mentioned that your insulation strategy at Eco Terra was far better than code. Do we need to rethink our building codes to force more of this kind of thoughtful activity, or is this something that building companies are going to adopt simply to meet consumer demand? What's the right way for us to think about driving the acceleration of adoption of green practices?
I think the code has got to move in the direction of requiring, more insulation. And, we have two camps in the country. One wants more of, environmentally sensitive things. The other camp doesn't want it, etc. But a great example is what happened recently in the Senate. The people who do not normally go for these green things, there's a lot of senators who were sitting on the other side, voted together with the people who would want all of these. So the reason it happened was like a lot of manufacturers of refrigerators and air conditioning equipment went to the Senate and said, like, we want this because Europeans are doing it. And if you don't put the CFC, fluorocarbons, put a tight lid on it, they are taking the market share from us. And we are going to be losing market share. So we need a law that forces us to reduce the impact of CFCs, which is a unique case. And let's have it. Business is now driving regulation.
Well, to some extent, I think we always have seen business drive regulation, but it's interesting that they're starting to respond to what people around the world, rather than just Americans, are focused on too, which I think is coming from your background in India and thinking about what we can learn from the rest of the world. Is the United States in the lead anymore, or are we really looking for inspiration elsewhere, and what should we be following?
I would say we are not in the lead. I think the leaders in this case are really the Europeans. For a number of reasons. They are resource constrained, so they have to save. They are traditionally thinking about saving. And if you look at a country like Sweden, which is far more advanced, I mean, they got the goal of zero carbon, net zero, all of these before, by the year 2040, 100%. And they have an embedded system in the country itself. For instance, beef farms are popular everywhere in Sweden. They have vertical farming. Vertical farming is coming to America, but really, if you look at who are the pioneers in this, who are the best, vertical farming saves a lot of energy. And, I'm talking about water and soil and fertilizer and all of this. We make it in a controlled environment. But if you look at who are the leaders, it's the Holland, it's the Dutch, and it's the Swedes. So they are teaching us, a few things in terms of sustainability. And then there's also the Swedish child starts to learn at grade school about environment and sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
We are not there. We are not there. We need to be, only we need to learn from the Europeans, I would say, quite a bit.
Is there a particular construction process or methodology that you would point to and say that's what we need to be doing with regard to insulation, materials they're using, their approach to the design of the density of people living in close proximity?
Yeah, I would say the passive house principle, which itself started in Europe, which is being implemented now, is a great one to follow, because the passive house has the principles of the insulation, the principles of clean air, the principles of energy production, all of these, and also not having, kind of like oversized windows everywhere. You need it for certain areas, but not everywhere, etc. Kind of like can we look at it from the perspective of how much energy the building is going to consume, how healthy is the building, as opposed to just, I just want to see, large windows everywhere. That's all it is. So there are other aspects as well. Look into that. So I think that is one area, and the second is the National Green Building Standards itself, which gives a lot of credit to the lot selection, the lot size, your water conservancy. For instance, you're talking about rain gardens and the bioswales and rain gardens and bee farms and all of that. For instance, native plants. This is a tremendous experience in Illinois. I know on a limited scale, talking to people who just got rid of their lawns and put native plants. Can you believe that the birds come, the songbirds and the nightingales, and then the all of a sudden bees are coming, and you talk to people who got rid of their green lawn and put native plants. They say it is a fantastic experience. I mean, you may say it doesn't look great, but listen, that's what native is all about. You want the birds, you want the bees, and you can do it.
So fit into nature rather than take over and remove nature when you're thinking about building.
Exactly.
Well, this is a great place to take a quick commercial break. We're going to be right back to talk some more. We're back to talk with Dr. Ganesan Visvabharathy. He's the founder of Hawthorne Development Corporation, a Burr Ridge, Illinois-based green building developer. Dr. Vish, thanks for continuing the conversation. One of the things you call out on your site as a key strength is the American idea of self-reliance. And I wanted to dig into why you feel that in particular, which sometimes can be, it's a double-edged sword, a strength with regard to sustainability.
Yes. When we rely on ourselves, internal manufacturing methods and internal production of energy, as opposed to importing oil from Middle East or anywhere else, or we are making the chips. If we make the chips locally, we can control the process in terms of energy consumption, etc. But if you import the chips from China, you don't know what they do, and you don't know how much embedded carbon has gone inside or in the production of it, etc. So the American idea of self-reliance, listen, we got everything. We really, I'm not saying I'm anti-trade, but the point is that as much as possible, if we do our own, and there is a lot of value to it, because we are not susceptible to political situations elsewhere. Secondly, we can control the process, so we know how much energy is being used, and we can produce things in a sustainable manner.
So you're not really talking to the kind of the idea of the isolated pioneer living entirely on their own. You're talking about a community living together and creating a sustainable economy rather than, I'm all in it for me and everybody else can take care of themselves.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. It's community that has, that can follow this concept. And
well, so when you're working on the MERU project, for instance, which is an elder care community, how do you design for community? I spent many years reading Christopher Alexander's work on a timeless way of building and a pattern language, for instance. And always am curious to know how people think about the design of a shareable and enjoyable space.
You mean to bring the community aspect?
Yeah. How do you build a community? I mean, people move into it and then begin to live there, but how do you design it in such a way that they coalesce as a community?
The one of the key features is that you have to provide a very generous amount of common space.
Okay.
So the meeting space has to be plentiful. For instance, our project in Virginia, first of all, it looks like a resort. You have 14 acres of land. And so outdoor space is plentiful. And indoor, there are so many meeting areas, and the activities director has got to make sure that you are completely packed with activities all day long. So 9 o'clock is a painting, art exhibition from 9 to 10. 10 to 11 is how to fix a carburetor in your car. 11 to 12 is poetry reading, etc. So,
well, thinking about the design, though, is it important, for instance, for people to be able to see one another's homes, or is it a sense of being isolated so that you can exit and go into the community also important?
That is a good question. If you look at the old Chicago buildings, many of them have like a courtyard in the center, and you can look around and you can look down, and et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to senior situation, a lot of them have health issues, et cetera. So we don't provide as much of like everybody else can see you, et cetera. But we provide a mountain view, we provide a forest view, we provide nice plants, et cetera. And then whenever you want, you can get out and mingle with others. So it's kind of like yes, it is meeting spaces, open spaces, but also privacy, because you have health issues.
So if you were giving advice to somebody who was looking for a home, whether that was multifamily or a standalone residence, what factors would you suggest they pay the most attention to ensure that they get the most sustainable place to live?
I think one of the prime questions to ask is really, how was this building built? Mm-hmm. So what was the insulation materials used? What is going to be my energy charges, projected energy charges? And do you have green building certification? Mm-hmm. If you remember in the US just a few years ago, people were willing to pay more for solar power. In other words, consumers were saying that that's okay, it's green power, so I'll pay more. Mm-hmm. So that is the kind of thing that is even happening. There is a segment out there that's saying, I'll pay more for a green building. And that, I would say, has got to change and say if more people are building green, well, you don't have to pay extra for green, because it doesn't cost more to build green. It's just a different method of building. If there is any cost difference, it's a very small difference of 2%. And if you know what you're doing, it disappears, because your operating costs are much lower, so you recover that money. So I would ask all these questions.
So like a compact fluorescent light or an LED light costs more up front, but saves you much more over the course of the life of the bulb. You should think that way about a house too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you said about a 2% premium at most, but it sounds to me like we're reaching parity in terms of green construction costs with traditional construction costs.
We are absolutely getting there because 5 years ago, solar power was like it was cost per watt used to be something like, whereas grid power was, I'm talking about Illinois, for instance, grid power was like 7-8 cents. Solar power was 20 cents.
Right.
But today there is grid parity. In 5 years, we have come a long way. So likewise, the building trade is also moving in that direction. We are getting to be green parity.
Do you see a need for continued subsidies of certain types of materials or practices, for instance, in order to encourage more adoption of those at this time? Do you have thoughts about what we should be making public policy to drive society toward?
Yes, there are areas where public policy should be more friendly and receptive. Just one area I can think of is geothermal. Geothermal systems, geothermal heat, for instance. Unfortunately, the tax credit is still 10% for commercial installations. Homeowners may get 30%, but commercial, when you build large-scale projects, it is not incentivized enough. It's an absolutely green technology. You save so much energy, you making use of the Earth's heat content. And so that is one thing I would suggest that public policy has to look at the incentives for green technologies, and where it is missing has got to be plug the holes. One is geothermal. The second is hydrogen is coming to be the talk of the town, more and more. So to a great extent, the production of hydrogen needs to be incentivized. We are these days looking at systems whereby you can have solar, you have the battery, and then the solar power is used to split the water via electrolysis into hydrogen and oxygen, and then you store the hydrogen in the ground so that at the time of wintertime you can release the heat to the building. So things like this need to be incentivized, because clean hydrogen is a great thing coming.
I would love to see that. I hope we get there. Let me ask you about the LEED standard. It's 32 years old, and it requires at least a 35% reduction in CO2 emissions for a project to qualify. Is it time for us to raise those standards? Should we be being more aggressive?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is time, because the LEED standard is several years old, as you know, decades old, and technology has advanced a lot more today. We have a lot more choices in green materials we can use, and they definitely, in terms of the standards for not just energy consumption of buildings, not only their carbon impact, not only their energy consumption, but also indoor air quality. It has got to be part of future certifications. It is not sufficient if you talk about building and its performance in terms of energy and the materials used. We have to talk in terms of indoor air quality, because COVID is gone today, but don't think it's gone forever. It can reappear next year. So if we don't have a system whereby we absolutely assure the people clean air constantly, we will be in trouble again.
Well, and because climate change exacerbates a lot of diseases that are passed through the air, that's certainly something we need to do to prepare to adapt to it as it gets warmer. But let me go back to LEED for a second. So it currently says 35% reduction in CO2 emissions. Where should we get that to? Should it be 50, 60, 70% in order to qualify as a truly green building?
I think it should slowly inch up over a period of, say, 20 years. Every year a couple of 3%, something like that. So we reach a point of at least 75 to 80% less carbon. And it can happen. It cannot happen overnight. But if you give time, we have a goal by 2042. This is where we are going to be. We are going to be, the 32% is being increased to 75, 80%. And just like California has put a rule that no more gasoline powered cars. That's it.
Yeah.
And, so it's sort of like that, but it has to come at the federal level. And I'm pretty sure companies are going to be leading the charge, not our lawmakers, unfortunately.
Well, unfortunately, our lawmakers are taking a lot of instruction from the wrong places these days. Many of our listeners may not be thinking about buying a home, but thinking about what they could do to make their home more sustainable. What would you suggest the 2 or 3 most impactful changes somebody could make to their house or their apartment building in order to make it more sustainable?
One of the simplest things you can do, a couple of simple things you can do. One of them is really solarize your home. Fortunately, every state has incentives. So solar is really an economical way to produce power at your home. So you can definitely consider that as one of the low-cost ways to make your place green. And there are other things like, if you give up your fascination for the lawn, the green lawn, I tell you, you can simply just try and use native plants, and that itself, you will see a huge change in your environment. When you see the birds and the bees, congregate at your place, you will see the difference. The third thing,
less water is required too, right?
Yeah. I mean, less water. Absolutely, because native plants are very sturdy, and they, in the event of a flood, the roots are so deep that there is no landslide. We see this constantly, areas underwater, etc. I mean, what happened in Mississippi recently, etc., because you have completely destroyed the natural habitat, natural plants, and then imported all this, lawn of various kinds, seeds of various kinds. And you can do simple things like apart from native plants, you do a little rain garden, you do composting. These are less costly things that the homeowners can do and yet be a great contributor to the environment.
And what about changing or making an investment in insulation? It sounds like, based on what you said earlier, that would be a very big change.
Yes, particularly roof cavity insulation, which is easy. You can go to the attic and add, and if the walls are all set, and you may not want to add anything, disturb the walls. But certainly roof cavity insulation you can do, and also the energy reducing faucets, Energy Star rated appliances, because everybody changes the appliances every at least maybe 15 years or something. And so now why don't you go for Energy Star rated appliances? And people would like to remodel their bathrooms and kitchens maybe every 10 years or 15 years. So we can do some, flow reducing faucets. These are simple things which are not costly. LED lights is another one, because you save phenomenal amount of energy saving and very long life. I mean, you put it up, and maybe until the next 25 years, you don't have to change the light bulb.
It's a big change, and not to make fun of a former president who mocked the idea, a huge way to save money. So as you look at both the new building and the renovation that you were just describing, how long do you think it will take for us to bring the built environment in the United States to a genuinely sustainable state? Are we going to be able to achieve this by 2050 or 2060, or is it going to take longer?
definitely it is possible to achieve by at least by 2060.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to set interim goals. I mean, you cannot say I'm going to be a marathon runner and then don't practice for 5 miles and 10 miles and 15 miles. You can't run the marathon overnight. So we have to set interim goals, in terms of carbon contribution of buildings,
Mm-hmm.
LEED standards, national green building standards. Everything must inch up. And this has to be from the federal side. There are progressive states like California, but not every state is California. There are more states that have regressive policies than progressive policies. So we need help from the federal government. And maybe in order to induce them, it's not just the businesses, but a lot of local grassroots level action. If we start with the counties, if we start with the local, little towns, we can make it happen.
So would you suggest that our listeners, if they want to make an impact, go to their local zoning commission meetings and start to talk with the commissioners?
Absolutely. That is how massive change is going to happen. Because you can't rely on the federal government, because politics changes, every few years. So you don't know. We take 2 steps forward and 3 steps backward. So we can't rely on it. But if you go to the local zoning meetings and insist that this has got to be there, and you want more density, you do this.
Right.
And you can incentivize the developers like that, and the people should raise their voice at these meetings.
They can shape their communities.
Yeah. And elect those for the local councils, local county board trustees, etc. Elect those who are with you, who vote for these environmental issues.
Well, Dr. Vish, I want to thank you for taking time to talk with us today. It's been fascinating.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed meeting you and talking with you.
How can people keep up on what Hawthorne Development is doing?
They can visit our website. It's called www.hawthorneworld.com, Hawthorne with an E, and then WORLD.com. We also have a solar website, solarmicronics.co, SOLARMICRONICS.co.
Well, great. We'll include links to both of those in the site, in the article that goes with this podcast.
That'll be great.
We've been speaking with Dr. Vish. That's Ganesan Visvabharathy. He is the founder of Hawthorne Development Corporation, and you can learn more about them at hawthorneworld.com, all one word, hawthorneworld.com, or at Solar Micronics, also one word, solarmicronics.co. Well, once again, we've heard that ordinary citizens can take action to make significant changes in their community's environmental impact, from changing your incandescent light bulbs to LED bulbs, to upgrading energy-efficient appliances, adding solar panels and insulation to an existing home. There are many paths to reduce your impact by 50% or more. These small changes add up. And in fact, there was a recent Nature Sustainability article about the reality of our opportunity. They looked at more than 112 different paths to sustainability, and more than half resulted in the kinds of reductions that we need to end climate change. So let's get busy. And as Dr. Vish said at the end, getting involved in your city's politics to recast zoning laws and local regulations to support environmentally responsible building and transportation practices can make an even greater impact. That's a legacy we can leave for our children and grandchildren. I hope you'll take a minute to share this show or dig into our archives of hundreds of interviews. We capture these ideas, but you, my friends, are the amplifiers that spread them to others. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors they can find sustainability in your ear on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or any of the other fine purveyors of podcast goodness that you prefer. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. We'll be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.